having me.
Oh, absolutely. I couldn't wait, actually. So I want to hit the ground running. I absolutely love, I mean, we've known each other probably a year now, I think,
Yeah.
when we
Hmm.
joined a program together. And, honestly, when I started to get to know you, writing my own book hadn't even really crossed my mind. And your way of posting made me think that it's actually possible. And in fact, now it's on my list, so I have to do it.
Woohoo!
So tell me a bit about how you became, first of all, a best-selling author and a book coach.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, becoming an author, that is the first leg of the journey, right? And so for me, I grew up, I wanted to be an author. I was a little girl and I just knew that was part of my story. And then I was slammed with external negativity and stopped writing for years. And I realized that I lost a huge part of myself when I did that. And it wasn't until I recommitted to writing my book that I felt that come alive again, that passion, that ferocity come to the forefront. And so it took me 15 years to write that first book because of the time that I stopped, because of self-doubt and perfectionism and external negativity. I didn't have my mindset in a place where I was in my zone of genius or powerful. I was always doubting myself or giving too much of my power away. So that's what happened with the first book. What I did right with that first book was early on, I realized that I wanted to be surrounded by a community that I felt supported by. And I sort of fell into a very beautiful sisterhood of indie authors, and I just soaked up all the information I could. And so I created a massive book launch. It had over 100 bloggers that blasted on release day. It had a month-long tour where I had multiple interviews a day, all of this stuff. And so I remember so vividly standing in my kitchen, barefoot in my basement apartment, and clicking publish. And usually there's like a delay of about 24 hours, and just feeling like, ugh, you want to puke because it's like, oh my gosh, it's in the world. What am I going to do? And then once it went live, immediately hundreds of downloads kept pouring in, and the 5-star reviews kept coming, and I got private messages and I got emails and I got all of this stuff. And it immediately, within the 24 hours it released, became a #1 hot new release. It was in its genre with all of these great authors, that were trailing behind it. And it was just this moment of feeling that, wow, this is what I've been working for.
Yeah.
And it was so powerful that it fueled me to continue to write and to continue to publish. And I just know the reason why I became a book coach. And while I was publishing, like as a writer, I've been through like every scenario. I've been a stay-at-home wife that was pregnant. I've been a full-time behavioral therapist that had a 3-hour daily commute with a toddler. I've been a full-time entrepreneur, like all of this stuff, right? So a lot of times when I talk to people, they're like, I don't have the time. And it's not about the time, because an author, the difference between an author that publishes 1 book or no books and the author that publishes 10, it all comes down to mindset, which I know that's like what you're masterful at, what you teach about. And that's so core, and that's so that's like the first tier of work that we do when I work with my clients. And I became a book coach because what happened was, I was a published author. I was best-selling. I had kept writing, and it was just my passion. My passion has always been books. I'm absolutely nerd-tastic in my love affair with books. And it's something I like, it makes me so happy. So what happened was when I was a behavioral therapist, I transitioned onto the online space, and like natural next step is life coach. So I tried to be a life coach for a year, but it was difficult. I couldn't get traction. And I realized it's because I was out of alignment with what I truly desired. And someone said, you should, I kept giving. I probably gave hundreds of hours of free just advice to people who ever wanted to become an author, about book launches, about book writing, about publishing, all of that stuff. And someone said, you should put an offer together about that. And I remember putting out an offer like for $25, right? And I had a friend PM me. She's like, what the flying F? Take that down ASAP. And within a month of that, I found the program that Delora and I joined. I went from charging $25 an hour to charging hundreds per hour. And I started booking my first 4-figure packages. And it was just because I was so fiercely in love. I was completely aligned. I was in my zone of genius. And showing up to work wasn't showing up to work. It was just showing up to serve and fiercely love. And I mean, that's where it all came from. It's just like my love for books and how it manifested itself into my life.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I love it. I love it. I can feel the passion. And I think that's so important. I think that, really makes the difference between someone who does a good job and someone who does a really great job, because you're not just showing up for the money at the other end necessarily. You're showing up for the people and the purpose. So I think that's incredible. Absolutely. And I love this idea that, it starts with mindset. I think, I've seen a few posts lately, or even just people that have tried different things, and it doesn't matter which area they're talking about. And they, kind of trip up on the mindset part, because a lot of people think that it's something that you can pay lip service to. And even though they think they're taking it seriously, it's a lifelong journey to change our mindset, really.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So you said that's one of the first things that you deal with your clients on. And do you think they realize that they have to work in that area, or?
Absolutely.
They do.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, I think what happens is generally people come to me and they're like, I want to write a book. Yay. Party hardy. They're really, the enthusiasm is there, and I totally get fed off of the enthusiasm. And then we have our first couple sessions, and then immediately the fear kicks in, and they're messaging me like, what if my story's not good enough? What if I don't have enough to say? What if people read my book and think that I'm a horrible writer? What if? And it's all of the fears that would probably attack them in any area of their life coming up to the surface. And what we do is we have to face them head on, because if we keep shoving them aside, then we're just putting over a Band-Aid over a festering wound, right? And so that's where my behavioral therapy comes in, because it's about conditioning not only your habits and behaviors, but digging deeper into your mindset to completely align with the intention. Because if you don't do that, then when you because one of my biggest things is that I want people to be able to work with me for a set period of time, or publish their first book with me, or go to a retreat with me, and then write 10 books on their own. Like after that, they've been given all the tools and the resources to replicate it over and over again. So that way they can have the power to step into it whenever they want. And the thing is that mindset is a continual battle, because just like any author, just like any entrepreneur, whoever, any human being on this planet will always face an element of fear or anxiety or overwhelm or insecurity at some point, and it can look different, but the process of approaching it can be very similar. And so we just have to, but we have to know that the process is essential. You can't just, write out the affirmations and be like, yep, I got that figured out. It's very deep work, and it sometimes is uncomfortable. Sometimes it's so vulnerable. Sometimes It's a wee bit emotional, a lot of times very emotional. But by going through that work, you're shifting everything internally to make what you truly desire possible. And that's where it all begins, is to be able to make the space for the intention to actually thrive.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's so important. Making this space. It's not just about, going through the motions. You have to
Exactly.
unload some stuff in order to make space for new stuff. Kind of like decluttering, really.
Exactly.
Yeah, I love that. So tell me, when you're writing your book, when you're in the moment of writing, do you feel like you're channeling? And I don't mean channeling, it depends on your spiritual practice, but do you feel like it's like natural, it just flows from you? Or are there times where it's like, forget it, and you just have to force yourself to write?
Yep. Been there, done that, all of it. And so this is what happens. So my last book that I wrote in 8 days was a book that just it was a flood. There was like the gates opened, and it was like spilling ink, spilling tears, hours nonstop, and it was over. But I knew that I needed to do it because it was such an emotional book for me that I needed to rip off the Band-Aid and get it done. So for that book, it definitely just came. But for my other books, is that I got very intentional about my time. So my second book, I wrote in about 6 weeks, and that's when I had the full-time job and the toddler and everything. And I didn't have big blocks of time. I had 2-minute to 15-minute blocks of time in my day to write, but I had an editor's deadline. So my booty was typing. So I couldn't afford to say, I don't want to do it. Or I'm not feeling it right now. I'm going to wait till I'm in the zone. I just didn't have that. But I also put that on myself. I put that pressure on myself. You don't have to as an author. But for me, I knew it would get me to get it done. And so every time I sat down for those 2-minute to 15-minute blocks, I was very clear, okay, I'm going to write about the scenery in this scene, or I'm going to write about this piece of dialogue or this character, or I was just very clear about what it was. And what that helped me to do is that I could force it for a 2-minute block or a 10-minute block, and it didn't feel yucky or overwhelming. It just felt like I'm going to squeeze it in. And so it also became sort of like a game with myself. That's another thing, is if something doesn't work for you, then change it. So if you are a writer that requires big amounts of time to really get in the zone and write and want to stay in that sort of space for a long time, then book a retreat, then cancel your client calls, then go away for the weekend. Figure that out for you and how that looks. If you're a writer that you're good with just going in and pulling out, like you can do that, then look at every part of your day. And it's like, when do I have a 2-minute, 10-minute, 15-minute block of time? And this is the thing, is that if you wrote 5 minutes a day, you could write your book in a year. There is no excuse of time, because it's all about intention and where we put it. Do you want to be staring at the water boiling, or do you want to write a book? Do you want to watch that commercial for the 15th time, or do you want to write in your book? And so it's when you become very fiercely connected with the intention that even the times that you have to force the writing, quote unquote, force the writing, it is so driven with the desire to finish that it flows. That once you get into it, it will start to flow. And so that's another thing that I tell with authors that are just starting or that are really overwhelmed by the process. I tell them, just write for 5 minutes a day, and it can be in 1-minute increments if you want, but get into the practice of writing so it's a non-negotiable piece of your day. And that way, what will happen is that you're going to crave it more and more and more. And then you can expand that 5-minute block a little bit and a little bit and a little bit until it's this centering piece, this grounding piece of your day that you just don't want to live without. And And that's always powerful to witness too.
Yeah, for sure. And I think the idea of fitting it in. Now, first of all, props to you. You got a book done working full time with a baby in 6 weeks.
Toddler, yeah.
Okay, forget about it. Like, props to you. Props to you. That's incredible. I thought you were going to say 6 months, but you said 6 weeks. I'm like, what? You know, I've pulled off some amazing things. I've had kids, but I don't know if I could do that. So that's awesome.
Thanks.
So when you're in the process of helping your clients through this, I'm just thinking some of the things that would pop up for me. Do you think that the author's voice, let's just say they're writing, and you know, we can use me as an example, but if we were writing, you know, a story that was real, do you think that if a person is not quite in tune with how that story is going to be, that it changes their voice through the book? You know what I mean? Like if it's almost if it's like a form of therapy or a form of getting it out, almost like the book that you wrote in 8 days. Did you feel your voice changed as the burden lifted off you and it came out into your pages?
So when a book is very intimate and you're writing, and sometimes people won't write their book because they don't know how it ends. So say they want to write it, but they're not sure if they have the happy ending or if it's just sort of like, you know, and so they stop. But the thing is that where your story ends up does not change where it began. Yeah. And there is something truly healing about writing the words down. And if the voice changes, that's just indicative of the journey that the author has gone through to end up at that last page. So you could be, and there's books written like this. In the beginning, it's scattered, it's negative, it's overwhelming, it's frenzied. And by the end, it's centered, it's calm, it's certain. And it's actually a very powerful gift to be able to reflect that kind of voice and journey in the writing itself, not just in the story arc, but in the actual writing. So one, when you're writing your first draft, pump as much of you into it as possible and be very gentle and non-judgmental about what that looks like. The first draft is just about getting the words onto the page, getting the beginning, middle, and writing the bones out. Then you're going to go into the process of developmental editing. And what that looks like is you cranking up who you are, cranking up your voice, amplifying your voice, and making sure that that voice is potent on every page. And so it is absolutely true that if you're writing something very intimate, a lot of times the style, the voice changes, but that's a beautiful thing. So don't feel like there's any limitations on you as you start to write and where that writing brings you. Sometimes the writing brings you and you're like, where the hell did you go? Like, what are you doing? Like, you want to rein it in. But I would say that a lot of times it's the people that just let go of the reins completely. That's where there's some real magic.
Yeah, that's really great. And I think that also circles back to the idea of working on your mindset to begin with, because in order to really let go like that, you have to really trust that, you know, the fear is not real. The fear is just the programming telling you that you can't do this or you shouldn't do this or whatever the voice says, because it's different for everyone, different but the same for everyone. Now, when you are working with your clients, you know, like you just talked about developmental editing. So obviously you take them through a very deliberate structure in order to work through writing a book. Tell us a bit about that and why is that so important? Like, why would someone really need, I get why someone needs a book coach, but tell others why it's so important to try to write a book with someone who's done it, been a bestseller from day one. Like that's, I think, really important.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So there are 101 explanations about why to use a book coach. I'm a very different book coach from those that are out there. And in the beginning, I was thinking, oh, I should morph into what the big wigs like these people are doing, because that seems like a good model to follow. And I tried it for a whole, 2 seconds, and it just didn't resonate with me, because for me, writing is an extension of soul. It's an extension of who you are. It's you being fully expressed, and it's artistic, it's creative, it's messy, it's powerful, it can change the world. That is my mission: heal the world with words, literary liberation around the globe. So that's sort of what you sign up when you get with me. And the thing is that the process is different depending on where you go. For me, what happens is that first we tackle the mindset so that we can allow the space for the intention. Then we go into the book vision, not the outline, but the vision. What do you want to create? Who do you want to create it for? What do you want people to say about your book? What do you want them emailing you about in the middle of the night to say thank you after they've read it? What is the core truth that will be brought to light in your book? Is that grand vision. And from there, that's when we start the outlining process. You go in, you outline the book, and then you make sure that that outline really is your heart and your mission, not that it's something that you've seen elsewhere or you think you should do or what have you. It's about, this is truly your words, your mission on the page. And then from there, it's all about teasing out the details and the writing process. And I think one of the biggest things that a book coach offers is the simplification of the process. So many times I'll sign up with a client or be on a client call, and it'll be the first call, and they're like, so what are we going to do about this publishing? What about Facebook ads? It's like, we'll get there for sure. You need a landing page. You need to get the momentum of marketing, all of that. And I love marketing, book marketing. Oh my goodness. But don't overwhelm yourself, you gorgeous soul. Like, simplify it for yourself. Take it in the phases in which it's supposed to come. You write the book, you edit the book, you publish and market the book. All of that needs to be in place, and there are phases, and there's no reason for you to try to smush it all together. So it's somebody to hold your hand along those steps so that you feel completely and totally certain as you take the next step that is the right step to take. So that clarity to be able to say, I know the direction I'm going, I am supported and held in this process. And then the accountability and the cheer squad along the way. So it's so easy to say, I'm going to write a book, yay, woohoo, and then be like 2 years later, yeah, I'll write that book sometime, right? It's like that. We douse the flames of our desire because we get overwhelmed, or that fire isn't fanned, isn't fueled. And so a book coach or a partner in that will always remind you of that big vision that you had in the beginning. It's like, what about Susie, who's going to email you in the middle of the night? What about the person that's desperately aching for what you have to say? What about you standing on that stage like you've always dreamed with that book in your hand? What about that? And so it's that constant reminder that your vision is a legitimate vision, but it's also absolutely necessary for you to pursue, because if it's in your heart, it must come out, and don't play small. And so a book coach holds the space, holds their hand along that process. And then in terms of the tail end part of it, the publishing and the marketing and all of that, there are so many articles online about how to do it right. And this is something that I'll say. My first book, I had that massive launch, right? My third book was about teen suicide and domestic violence. It was not supposed to be this hoopla party. It was about communion, connection, reverence, and healing. And so that book I launched completely differently because the heart of the book was different. And I could not force it into a model, into a schematic that people would say, this is how you do it. You know, for that book, it wasn't about hundreds of bloggers, you know, having a party on day one. It is about doing a candle lighting of all the people we've lost. It was about the hundreds of messages that I received about people they lost to suicide or their own stories of domestic violence, very intimate. And so when you have someone that isn't trying to force you through a specific model, you are able to really step into alignment with who you are, what your vision is, and what your book demands, not something external imposing onto you.
Yeah, that so makes sense. And it's so true for any part of, you know, whether it be business or life, if it's not something that is tailored to us, it just doesn't work the same. I mean, you know, even if you just think something as basic as clothes, anybody can go buy a size 10 if that's what you are, but then it doesn't always fit the same because we have different curves and lovely changes in their body that needs to be addressed. So you can tell when someone's wearing a nice tailored suit versus someone who's just wearing off the shelf. And there's nothing wrong with off the shelf, but in order to honor the book and honor your voice, I think that's really important to have the tailored approach throughout the process, because I'm sure that, you know, there's a structure to the writing and there's a process to do it, but it I imagine that that part can also be personalized depending on the style of book or style of person.
Yes. I love that you brought that up, actually, because my last book, I had my editor, she said, now I'll have to try to remember exactly how she wrote, because I broke a lot of the rules when I wrote that book. And she said, to an unskilled eye, people will say that you wrote this wrong, but the true masters will realize what it is. And I remember that one, it gutted me, because she also went on to say that it was the most beautiful book she'd ever read. And I realized in that moment, and looking back, like when I talk to authors now, they say, well, should I do this? Do I do that? And it's like, well, what do you feel like? Should I write in first person, third person? Should I do it in past tense or present tense? Like all that, I'm like, that doesn't fucking matter.
Yeah.
What matters is how does it come out, what feels most natural, and what feels most true. And if you can own that, and maybe even let it go, like throw it all in there for the first draft, then whatever comes rises to the surface as the most eloquent or beautiful or true to you. Then we'll edit it and it will be in that way.
Yeah,
so
for sure.
Like, screw perfectionism. Does not work in the beginning.
No, it doesn't work. And who really is the measure of perfection anyways?
Exactly.
It doesn't exist. There is no such thing. I think that's a really key point for anything. Like anybody who's stuck spinning their wheels or, you know, waiting for something to be perfect. Perfection is bullshit. It changes. So why don't you just, you know, define perfection for yourself? This is perfect to me. It might not be your perfect, but it's mine. So
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And you think that, you know, while you're messing around with being perfect, so-and-so is making bank or changing lives being imperfect. So which is going to be more important to you? The typo or the fact that someone's life was changed in a matter of hours that they read your book?
Absolutely. Now, I know that, you know, it's true to me, but I've heard other people say it as well. And actually, it was so funny. I don't know if you read the book, The Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert.
I actually just bought it. I'm going
Did
to
you?
read it. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I might be giving away a part. But anyways, one part that really struck me was the idea that, and I've heard other people say it before, especially in the idea of, in the laws of the universe, there's no idea that's new. It's been there and you're just accessing it.
Mm-hmm.
So at one point, Elizabeth talks about a book that she had an idea for. I don't remember if she started writing it or not. And then it turns out she met someone else that was actually writing almost exactly the same book.
Mm-hmm.
And so this idea that, you know, ideas flow in and out, and that you can let go of something. Don't beat yourself up if you didn't take action or it didn't feel right at that point. When you have someone that, is facing the idea that they want to write a book, they have an idea for it, but it's either personal or time or whatever bullshit story they're giving themselves to not do it. What is the risk of not taking action at that point? Like, how much bigger does the resistance become if they don't take action?
Oh, such a good question. Such a good question. I wish, this is just coming from me, I wish that the 12-year-old me never let my dream go. I would have been published as a teenager, I'm sure. I would have the whole trajectory of my confidence and faith and creativity would have been vastly different. But instead, I heaped on the self-doubt, the perfectionism, the fear, and feeding into the external negativity for years, to the point that once I was finally ready to write, it took me years to write it because I had to untangle all of the bullshit that I had heaped on to the essence of my true self. So this is what I believe is, one, it's never too late. Doesn't matter where you are, doesn't matter how long you've had your book on a dusty shelf, doesn't matter how long you've pushed it aside, it's never too late. On the flip side, don't procrastinate on it, because then it could be something that when you get to the end of your life, you regret. And there's this meditation or this reflection that I have on SoundCloud, and a lot of the things I put up there are very motivational, very uplifting. But this reflection was, what if I never? And it's all about it taking the book out of your hands, having never written the pages, having aching and desperate and wanting for so long and never ever penning a word. How do you feel? And if that feeling is shitty enough to get you to move, then you need to move now.
Yeah. I think that's really powerful. Wayne Dyer talks about that. If there's a nurse he met, I think from Australia, she wrote a book about people on their deathbed. She was a end of care nurse. I forget the name right now. Anyhow, palliative care, that's what it is. And she was interviewing these people that were on their deathbeds ultimately, and what were their 5 biggest regrets. And I don't know the end of that story other than to say every one of them had a regret of something they should have done, but they stopped because of fear or what someone else thought of them. And I think that's so powerful. And like we think, oh yes, okay, I've listened to the blab and I'm going to do it. And, Coach Rocky says so, and Dolores said this. And then you go back to your daily life and you just forget about it, or things just start creeping in. And I think it's so important to take action, no matter how small, towards what it is you want. And to not let life or fear kind of dull that.
Oh, yes. Yes, because imagine how brightly we would blaze if we doused the fear and not the dream.
Yeah.
And absolutely. I think that, Marianne Williamson said, it is my favorite quote of all time. It is not the fear that we are inadequate. It is the fear that we are powerful beyond measure.
Oh, yeah.
And I love that quote because really, our core truth is that we are powerful manifestors of a reality.
Yeah.
Why not own it now, today, this moment? And it's also, the whole idea, I created a retreat, but what I realized when I was creating it was, okay, it's 7 days in paradise for people to write their books. Yay. But then I was like, no, I don't want them to get there and then scramble to write. I want them to feel held and supported before, so they know what their vision and what their outline is when they get there. And I don't want to just ditch them on the last day and see bye, have fun with your life now. I want to give them time afterwards so that they can integrate that creative power into the life that they are returning to. Because if you're a creative, and this is true of any dream, you have to integrate it fully into your life. And it can be with tiny little steps or tiny little bits of time, or it can be, or it could overwhelm and overtake your life, and your life completely changes. It doesn't matter which way it goes, as long as you honor it.
Yeah, that's so true. I think that's really powerful, to acknowledge however it fits in your life, but then to do something about it, however big or small. I also wanted to say, mention something I think that's so important for anybody listening. And I know that you've done work around this, so it's okay to say, but we are, first of all, 100% responsible for the lives we have. Whether people on this that listen to this recording believe it or not, we are 100% responsible. And the other thing is that every single second of our lives has happened for a particular reason to get us to where we are today. And I think that's really important. And, I say it without hesitation because I know that's work that you've done. But the idea that you weren't able to write as a 12-year-old little girl that wanted to write, I think is incredibly powerful. That makes you a more compassionate and empathetic coach now for people who have done the exact same thing or held it down for that long as well. And you wouldn't be able to relate in the same way if you didn't have that experience. So I think that's so important.
Absolutely. And I do agree with that, because I am so fierce about my work. To me, this is truly soul work, because I know what it felt like to feel constricted and alone and unable. And then I know what it felt like to, after years of keeping myself in that box, what it was like to be set free. And that journey was so powerful that I never want anyone to linger in that space as long as I did, ever. And this is another thing in terms of what you were saying, the full responsibility of our lives, because I gave my power away everywhere, right? And so this is what happened. I had this point where I was, always faced with the external negativity, always gave my power away, always gave up. And there was a point where I was finally writing my book again, that a person that I loved was like, who makes money as an author? That's stupid. And I was a very successful behavioral therapist. So it just seemed bizarre that I was wasting my time. And they took my manuscript and they threw it in the trash. And I remember that they were, standing in front of me, and I could feel myself retreating to that old conditioning that says, okay, it's time to give up. It's time to give in. It's time to back down. It's time to let go of this dream. And it was a very fierce point of stepping into my responsibility to own the life that I wanted. And so I just walked over, I took the manuscript out of the trash, and I said, I write because I have to. And it was just months later that the book became a bestseller. And
yay.
It's like, bam, baby. But sometimes you don't have that radical turnaround so quickly. Sometimes you really are trudging through for a little while before you see the benefits or the rewards, but it's so worth it. And I have to say that the person that stopped me and the people that stopped me when I was a young girl, and the person and people that stopped me when I was older, that fed me that all the fears, or fed into all that I thought. Once I stepped into my power, I didn't give a damn about what anybody thought, and I was unyielding in my pursuit of my goal. The people that were negative either removed themselves from my life or changed to honor me. And I think that's really powerful, is that if we have a dream,
that's so incredibly powerful.
if we step and own it, then we are demanding of the universe, we are demanding of the people around us to either recognize us in our power or to get the effers out of the way.
Yeah. Step up or step out.
Yes,
Either way, I'm moving forward.
exactly.
Um,
Exactly.
yeah, that's so important. It really is, because there's so many times where people don't understand. I've said this before, and she'd be mortified to hear me say it now. But my mom has told me before, well, you're just going through a midlife crisis, because I was leaving a well-paying government job, which nobody does that around here. I'm in Canada, that especially, to pursue something that may or may not work out. And I said, well, yeah, that's your perspective, and thank you for it. But I tried not to do this. Like, I tried not to move forward in this way. Just like you said, the 12-year-old little girl put the idea of being an author away because of the fear and everything, people suppressing you, but it still came out anyway. You can hold the beach ball underwater, but eventually it's going to come up.
Absolutely.
You just might not be able to predict where or how. So
I love that.
Yeah, I think it's so important for people to understand that for themselves, that anytime you're living in your power, or you're pursuing something that's different than anything else that you've done before, there are going to be people that don't understand. There are going to be resistance to it, but you have to pursue anyway. And that's where you kind of really have to decide for yourself in your own quiet time that this is something that's really important to you. And you have to decide, is this something I'm going to give up for what?
Right.
What is going to be the thing that stops me? Because asking that question makes you aware of when it's going to happen. And, as part of, I love the idea that you start with a vision with your clients for their book. Because like you said, you tie back their fear back to the vision. Okay, why are we doing this? Who's Susie going to email if it's not you in the middle of the night? I love that. So what do you think is, what is the biggest bullshit excuse we give ourselves for not pursuing writing a book?
Ooh.
I know it's different for everyone, but I'm sure there's a common.
Oh yeah. Yeah. The common one is, who am I to write this? That's the number one. You'd think it would be time, or something like that, but it's, who am I to write this? And they think of all of the greats, the great writers, and they're like, oh, they're amazing. Who am I to write this? Or they think about their life story and think that it's too, similar to someone else's. Like, who am I to write this? And it's like, no, not who are you to write this, but who are you not to? Yeah. And to really dig into the unique voice, the unique experience that only they can bring to the page, is how they start to really understand that, if Elizabeth Gilbert never penned a word, who would be Elizabeth Gilbert if Danielle Laporte didn't write her book and she just stayed with coaching? Where would be the Desire Map or the Firestarter Sessions? All these books that a lot of people read today, it was because those people were brave enough to write them. So this is your time. Write it.
Yeah. Oh God, I love that. I have goosebumps. Actually. I think that's so important. And I think the other thing that I've always appreciated about you, first of all, you have the same, or my daughter has the same name as you. That's awesome. But my other daughter, my oldest, wants to be an author and an editor. Oh, wow. And, I don't know where we were this summer, but there was someone in our family that said, oh, you can be a starving, or people don't make a lot of money with books or something. I don't know something like that. And I remember as a little girl, I was going to go to art school or university or something like that. And I was told, well, yeah, you can always be a starving artist. And, the idea, like, money to me was really important back then. I was like, okay, I'm not going to do that. No, I'm going to move away from that idea. And I have to admit that when I started this journey, my own journey about 3 or 4 years ago, there were so many ways that I was trying to allow my kids to be who they wanted to be. But I was putting up these, well, you have to be careful. And yes, that's a good idea. And then one day I just realized, well, who the hell am I to say? Who knows? I have one that wants to be a professional hockey player and the one that wants to be an author. And then I have 2 that want to be singers and actors, whatever. you know, anyone that was in those professions before, who were they to do it? Why couldn't it be my kids, right? And I think that's so important to ask ourselves, or even to ask of anyone that we may have said that to in our lives. So when you're trying to shake your potential clients, or even clients, out of that kind of pattern or programming, what is the biggest aha for them? Like when they kind of come through to the other side, what is the biggest thing that they say or feel about that?
So generally, the way that I've seen people really get it is when I share the stories of other people who've done it. So, you know, to know that, like Stephenie Meyer and Twilight became this huge freaking thing, right? I mean, it took the young adults publishing industry by storm and really brought it to the forefront of publishing. She got she got dozens of rejection letters, and one of them was really cruel and saying like she was a terrible author and would never make it. And then a few letters after that was the multiple six-figure offer. You know, so it's, and this comes up time and time again, you know, the person that felt like, you know, J.K. Rowling and her transformation story, and all of these people that have so much, the hero's journey, you know, they were in a place that was desperate and difficult, but then they honored who they were, and that manifested itself in incredible success. And for some clients, it's not necessarily about being a bestseller or it being their main source of income. Some of them, it's about being a centerpiece of their coaching business. For some people, it's just about being able to share their story. And for some people, it's about just being seen as an author. So those, you know, there's so many different shades of what it looks like to be successful in their eyes. And it's just to help them identify, help them to gather all of the evidence that result, that success, that vision is in fact possible. You fuel your life, you flood your life with the evidence. So that way, as you keep taking your baby steps, you don't feel like you're alone in them, that the trail has been blazed before, and you're just, you're with the greats, or, you know, you're in it for the service, or you're in it for the expression, whatever it looks like. And so whatever their vision is, whatever their goals are, if there's a lot of resistance, then I go out and I find what story they need to hear to remind them that it's possible.
Oh, that's wonderful. I think that's a great idea, and so important, because we really do want to know that we're, first of all, not the only ones that have felt this way before, and that, you know, there's other people that have persevered through, you know, the same or worse than what we've been through, and have come out the other side successful. I think that's so wonderful. Now, tell me about, when is your retreat?
Yeah, my retreat's in March. Oh, my heart is bursting. I'm so excited for it. Yeah, it's in March. It is in Bali, but we are starting the experience, like I said, doing before and after time, one-on-one time and group time in February. You know, it's time to fall in love with your story, fall in love with your power as a writer. And then we have the retreat in March in Bali, in this beautiful location where there are these, every author gets her private bungalow, her private sacred space. And there'll be delicious self-care and a photo shoot for each woman. And then afterwards, it's all about, okay, what are your next steps? What do you need to do? How do you integrate all of this into your life? And yes, I've said this before. In 2015, January 2015, I said I wanted to create something sacred. And this is what that is. Truly, I'm so in love with it. So I'm so happy to bring it to the world.
Yeah, I'm excited for you too, really. When I saw the idea kind of emerging
Hmm.
for you, I thought, oh my God, that's so great. And I love the idea that you have something before and after for people. Sorry, I have something in my eye. Um, are you full up for your retreat?
No, I still have some spaces left. Yep.
Do you have a link where people can reach you? Can you post it in
Yes.
here? I'm pretty sure on the replay it shows up, but if it doesn't, you can find your stuff where?
The retreat is bleedinkinbali.com. And then my website is rockycallen.com, ROCKYCALLEN.com. And on there, there's ways to connect with me and check out ways to work with me. But another thing that I would love to, open up to your tribe is that I have a free Facebook group on Facebook that I'm in all of the time. I'm in there almost daily. And it's just this really high vibe book tribe where people are celebrating their milestones. They're celebrating their word count. They're celebrating each other. And they're all different kinds of authors. And that is the Bleed Ink tribe. So facebook.com/group/the Bleed Ink tribe. Request in there. And then I put so many free resources there, and I'm cheering every author along the way.
Oh, that's awesome. That's so great. And I think it's really important, even if you're just thinking about writing a book. Because I can tell you, like I said at the beginning of our time together, it wasn't even on my horizon really. And then the more I saw you talk about it, I'm like, that is possible. So it's like you creep in. And I think that's important for anyone that wants to join your Facebook group. Or even book a call with you to see what it's really all about. I think that I can certainly say that it's been a pleasure knowing you, and the idea that you're doing this in such a soulful way, I think is so important, that people will be guided through their process, whatever that might be for themselves, and that there's no cookie cutter. Cookie cutter is kind of, it's good for cookies, but
but we're humans.
yeah, exactly. The gingerbread man can stay in the
Yeah.
oven for a while longer. So, what is the biggest message you would like to tell people around writing, or anything else for that matter?
My biggest thing that I tell people, and it's the thing that I know with absolute certainty, and this is absolutely true for anyone who wants to write a book, but it's absolutely true for anyone else too, is that if there is a dream in your heart, then you're not only deserving, worthy, and capable, but it is your duty to pursue it, because it is the pursuit of that dream that will make you become who you were meant to become, and it will eliminate the path of how you should impact the world. And a person that is on fire, a person that is alive, awake, present, blazing with their truth and their passion, will absolutely make a mark on the world in the most luminous and powerful way. So again, one thing I have to say, if you have a dream in your heart, you must reach for it.
Oh, I love that. That's so important. And I think it's even more important when you're thinking about writing a book, or you're doing something that's outside of what maybe your comfort zone is. Sit with it. Is it truly your desire? Then you have to go for it. And, what better way than to hire someone like you that can help them guide them through it? Or even if they're not ready to hire a coach at this time, go into your Facebook group, Bleed Ink.
The Bleed Ink tribe. Mm-hmm.
The Bleed Ink tribe. Perfect. I think that's so important. I have to say that, I was excited for this interview. I really have been spoiled with, I tried it out once. I've loved doing the Mindset Mastery interview series, and every guest I say is my favorite. So I have to stop saying it. I'm going to have to come up with another way. This has really been a really great interview. I've loved every second of it.
Thank you.
I will have to have you back at some point. And be sure, if anyone's listening, check out her retreat, check out her books, check Rocky out. She's got the stuff. And I've like I said, I've known her for a year now, and a little more than a year now. And I just know what soul she brings to this. So please, by all means, check Bleed Ink out, wherever it is, Bleed Ink in Bali, or on Facebook, or wherever it is. Coach Rocky is the lady you need to speak to for writing books. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Laura. This was absolutely awesome. It's such an honor to be here with you. Thank you.
You're most welcome. Thank you. And we will, we will keep up to date on everything that you're doing. Anytime I see something that you post, I try to always support it because I genuinely feel that. So thank you. And we'll be in touch soon.
All right. Take care. Bye. Thank you.
Okay. Bye.